Nikolas Badminton is my guest today on Future Cities Africa. He's a world-renowned futurist, researcher, and media celebrity. He leads the team Exponential Minds, an expert advisory firm that helps organizations, trillion-dollar companies, progressive governments, and Hollywood shift their mindset from what is to what if. Nick, welcome. Give us a quick tour of your background, major highlights, and your current work.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the podcast, Dan. So my background, went to university after sort of not really doing very well at school. Got pretty good at computers when I was a kid. So I studied computing. I did applied psychology computing. And back in the 90s, I studied artificial intelligence and linguistics and organizational psychology, a number of different disciplines. And throughout my career, I was a technologist and a strategist. And about 8 years ago, I started organizing events where people would fly from all over the world to Vancouver in Western Canada, where I used to live at the time. I'm now in Toronto, over in sort of central Canada, as it were, and brought people together to talk about humanity and technology and that collision and the apex of, you know, urban centers and rural places, and also how technology was changing life for everyone. And over the past 8 years, I've been really lucky. I've done over 300 keynotes and worked with many clients to think about everything from like urban design all the way through to artificial intelligence, automation, agriculture, you know, every kind of facet of society. So yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what I've been doing. And and now I sort of literally, I do consulting, I produce events, I do a lot of online keynotes because of the pandemic. And the work that I'm doing today feels more essential than ever, which is people trying to understand the future. And I always say, okay, let's shift the mindset from what is to what if. What if is an invitation to be creative and wonder, what if we made different decisions? And what if we implement different kinds of technologies? What if we look at society in a different, more equitable and egalitarian way, right? So that's it. That's it. That's what I do. I'm a futurist, and the focus on that incredible future for me is something that's more essential than ever today.
Let's talk about cities. I'm going to start with an easy one. What is your definition of a smart city?
So it's interesting. Over the years, I've chatted to a lot of municipalities in North America, and I've managed to travel a lot around the world, across Europe and into Asia. A couple of years ago, I managed to get into Marrakesh as well, and all of this perspective sort of really made me wonder. You know, do we go with the standard industry smart city definition, which is like a programmable city and a city that can be optimized through technology and sensors and cameras and all kinds of things? That's a typical sort of definition. My definition is that a smart city is designed for people, first and foremost. It's equitable and egalitarian. It supports culture, and it's programmable and optimizable. And it doesn't sort of weaponize the surveillance that can come out of that, really. So a smart city is a city that works for the people. And it's as much about policy and urban design and human-centered design as it is the implementation of technology, which so many people sort of put smart cities into, really.
African cities have their own unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to being resilient and smarter. That said, Africa can learn from global initiatives, as many of these challenges are of a global nature. If we are thinking about inclusive cities, data privacy, uplifting communities, Big Brother watching us. Can you share some international smart city experiences or initiatives, and kind of what are the challenges of implementation?
Yeah, so there's a few cities that I like to talk about. For a number of years, I've been talking about Barcelona. And what they've been doing with regards to their smart city initiative, it's actually been really interesting. So when the 2008 sort of recession hit, Barcelona was in a spot. And I went to Barcelona years ago, and it's this amazing, organic, cultural city where everyone's connected, and it's a beautiful place, but you know they had a lot of problems in terms of how it was designed, how it was run, the traffic flows, a whole number of things. So back in 2008, their mayor was very progressive and designed a smart city workforce. And what they did was they they split the city into 12 different areas for intervention. So transportation, water, energy, waste, open government. And they initiated over 22 programs. And there was over 83 different projects. And what they did was put in some very sort of practical, smart ways to, manage lighting, manage water, manage traffic flows, parking revenues. And off the back of this implementation of technology, but with a focus on humanity and making the city a better place, they ended up saving over $55 million US in smart lighting, $58 million in optimizations around water. What was fascinating is they increased parking revenues by about $50 million a year, which basically meant that their parking system was completely broken at that point. But what was really fascinating about this, that, over the period of time from 2008 to 2012 and into the modern day, they've created nearly 50,000 jobs to basically manage this. But, there's benefits from running a city in a way that's more optimized with greater oversight through, the uncovering of data and the use of data science and analytics. And that is that, humans are in the mix. And I never think that we're just going to be like, oh, we're just going to outsource everything to technology and there's going to be one person in a big control room, right? It's going to be very much on the streets and people working together. Technology's there as a tool. It's not the thing that replaces us entirely, right? So Barcelona's that first example of a smart city with technology, but with a very sort of human basis to it, really. But then it was quite interesting. A couple of years ago, I flew to Songdo, South Korea. Now, I was speaking at a conference with the United Nations called Resilience Frontiers. And that was about climate change. And it was amazing meeting of designers and philosophers and thinkers and people from all over the world. And I was staying in Songdo. And Songdo's been often harked as one of the world's, premier examples of smart city infrastructure. I think Cisco had a big part playing in that. And, they put in a massive data backbone. They redesigned the city to be optimized, road systems, places where people eat and buy groceries, go to restaurants, places where they live. There's parks and everything. And when I got there, I was super excited. And, the roads were empty. It didn't seem like there was any consideration of the design for runners or people on bicycles. It was very deliberate in its design. Here's a park, here's a walkway, here's a bench, here are some streets. This is where people live, and it kind of felt a little inhuman in a way. It lacked that kind of community aspect. It was like, the people live in the towers and they come out for the things that they need and then they go back into the towers. It's like an ant colony. And I don't really think that's how things should be. But, from a technology perspective, you go to Songdo International Business District. Yeah, it's on fire. There's all kinds of facial recognition, CCTV, whatever, right? And you can see that kind of technology being sort of dialed up across Asia. I mean, there's about 1,000 smart city projects in the world today. About half of those are in China. So you've certainly got the technocratic angle towards that. But the last example I talk about when I talk about smart cities is more of a philosophical approach towards what people actually want. And so this is the new mayor of Paris. Has come up with a program called Paris on Commune. And it's like the 15-minute city. Now, for a very long time, Paris has been obviously organized into arrondissements or districts. And every single district has got its own facilities and services. They say, even before this mayor came into administration, that it was the city where you could get anything that you want within 15 minutes. Right, so you can get to see the doctors and the dentists and the grocers and whatever you need. What's really interesting is she's got a radical approach where it's people first, bicycles first, like heavily reducing parking in Paris. And if you've ever been to Paris, you know that parking is an absolute nightmare on the best days. And watching someone actually park their car in Paris is like an event on its own, right? And but what's really interesting is that, you know, she's around designing green spaces. She's making it free for public transportation for anyone that's, you know, in school or in education. She's kind of created this real equitable, egalitarian approach, and in a very French, you know, socialist way, right? And that's soft socialism, not, you know, sort of hardcore socialism, if we've got any North American friends that are watching, right? But this is like, you know, creating a city that's sort of living and breathing and working together. Yes, there is tech there. It's very much in the background to the forefront, which is community, which is that life and vibrancy. And when I've been thinking about Africa and my experiences of having traveled to Marrakesh and whatever, that's the kind of smart city that I think Africa needs, where it's people in the foreground. If there's any technologies, they're in the background, and we can create something that's a culturally rich and vibrant place. And you've got the benefit of running a city in a way that, you know, is fiscally very responsible. You know, it's very efficient financially, and yes, it can generate revenue, and those revenues can go back into services, right?
Yeah, I think some of the advantages for African cities is, you know, actually the lack of infrastructure that allows African cities to leapfrog with certain technologies. Also, our very youthful African people are some of the great benefits. Recently, an African thought leader told me, for smarter cities in Africa, it's important to first focus on the contextualized vision of the city that you are in, and find answers to, firstly, imagination, then governance, and then the systems and processes that you want to put in place. She also mentioned tech is only an enabler, which is something that you've mentioned. She also said, tech on its own cannot save us. It could, however, destroy us. I'd love to know what you think of this.
You know, this is it. Over the past few years, especially as sort of machine learning and the opportunities in sort of artificially intelligent systems sort of come to the fore, you know, technology could destroy us. Well, technology, it's always been a tool, and, you know, we create the tool and then the tool creates us in a way, right? So you can see that's particularly true with technologies like the smartphone or the internet, whatever. You know, we develop it, and then we see the opportunity in it, and then that bounces back out into society with a cultural change as well. Could technology destroy us? I think that it's people at the heart and center of it. Like, people can make decisions that make it very difficult for other people. The technology isn't really smart enough to do its own thing, and we're not going to be living in a world of Terminators with artificial intelligence. So, you know, let's nip that particular thought in the bud, right? So I think we need to have a huge amount of responsibility. I use an acronym when I talk about smart cities with clients, and I can't claim to have invented this, but, you know, so there's some really smart people out there. It says, you know, if you look at the word HEART, HEART, the H is for human-centric design. You know, what are our needs? What are our desires? How do we need to operate? What do families look like? Schools, places that we live? You know, what do food systems look like? You know, human-centered design. Secondly, the E is entrepreneurial spirit, giving people the opportunity to be part of that story of the city and the country and the community, and to build it out. Everything from, like, you know, the person that makes, you know, the most amazing breads, all the way through to the person that develops systems that help us manage cities as a whole. And then the A is asset development for the greater good. And asset development, you know, everything that we develop, everyone has an opportunity to feed into it and to benefit from that as well. And then, you know, the R is around renewable, repeatable, replicable, you know, recycling. You know, this circular economy idea, the fact that, you know, we're an incredibly wasteful species, and the world isn't very good at reusing what we throw away. So really building that into our city infrastructure is going to become incredibly important. There's trillions of dollars on the table in terms of benefit, you know, whether that's jobs, whether that's saved income, saved spending, and whatever, around being able to optimize our waste. And then the T is around technology-enabled connections. You know, we often fetishize technologies like, oh, the blockchain's going to do this, or the internet is doing that. It's like, no. The way that we use them changes everything, right? So that's what I mean by technology-enabled connections. Yeah. So, will technology destroy us? No. Bad administration by humans that lack principles that are good for humanity will destroy us, really,
Talking about Africa, what is your view on the explosive growth expected and where we're headed in Africa? Perhaps you can touch on the impact of external investors and likely overall impact.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me. As I said, I've been to Marrakesh. I haven't ventured into other parts of Africa, and I certainly hope to do that over the next few years. And it's really interesting as I sort of look and do my research. I know Bronwyn really well and chatted to her and did some podcast interviews with her, and looking at Nigeria and Ethiopia, looking at Senegal, looking at like South Africa and some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. What we're seeing is an incredibly young population. I think the median age in Africa today is around about 18, 19 years old. And what we've got is a society that's trying to really build itself up into something new. And there's this whole notion of leapfrogging because there's not the legacy technological backbone. And there's been a lot of opportunity. Again, Africa's been put on a pedestal by external investors. And, the Belt and Road Initiative from China obviously seeps down into Africa. Chinese investment is incredible. American investment has really sort of waned, as is European and UK investment. So you very much got this sort of this world of opportunity in Africa. You've got partners like people in China that you have to sort of keep at arm's length, but also be collaborative with and really get the working relationship working well, so that you do get the monetary investment in places like Lagos, which is just incredible. They say that Lagos by 2100 is going to be the world's largest city. And it sort of boggles your mind to think that Lagos might end up being like 88 million people. But then, you look at Lagos on the ground today, that urban spread and bringing people in from rural areas is a trend that's going to accelerate over the next sort of 10 years anyway, right? So I think that in Africa it's really interesting because it's this the countries within Africa are places that really have opportunities to step into a world that's been sort of tested and tried, in Asia, in Europe, and North America, and take some of the good lessons and implement them in ways that create somewhat of a good equal society, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting world of dynamics and investments, and some are going to benefit and some are going to struggle. There's going to have to be the breaking of certain ways that cities operate today to make way for new cities. That needs to be done in a responsible way so that we're replacing something that might be a little bit dysfunctional yet cultural and important with something that is cultural, important, and technological, and has got good governance and puts the power into the people's hands.
So you've mentioned China a few times. I think if we get the majority of investment from China, we might end up looking like that example that you mentioned that we don't want to look like. That's perhaps a scary thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, China really is. It builds cities from the ground up very quickly. I spent some time in Beijing and also Hong Kong a few years ago. Hong Kong's already very progressive. It sort of breaks my heart to see what's happening there right now, but I feel that was inevitable. If you go into China, building these huge cities, I've been to places like Guangzhou, I've been to Beijing. Beijing, I went to the Hutongs, which are these amazing sort of single-story sort of bungalows, these little courtyards, beautiful. Let's rip them out. Let's put up towers. You can't destroy some sort of cultural relevance that is important to the identity of cities in the name of progress. And I think that's the challenge in anywhere, whether it's Africa, whether it's more underdeveloped parts of North America or Europe or Asia, right? I think that's what we need to be really interested in doing is really preserving these communities. Yes, progress is inevitable. Yes, progress is needed. But like, let's not just try and create a world where we wear, silver jumpsuits and get into our flying cars. And in the meantime, the Blade Runner-esque city street level, is this seedy underbelly, which could happen if we don't do this responsibly. And I think government is an incredibly important thing here, like party politics and moving from initiative to initiative. There needs to be some consistency. I think there needs to be, non-partisan decision making and everyone on board with a big idea. And that big idea is to create cities that are good for people and good for families and good for communities as a whole, right?
Let's get into some of the fun questions. If I gave you a magic wand and I told you could change one thing about humanity, what would it be and why? Just in the way we think or the way we do things.
You know what? That's a pretty big opportunity, right? Okay, magic wands don't exist. There's one thing I could change. So society's been created by war and taxes over thousands of years. If we could remove the idea that we have to be at war to progress, and whether that's a softer kind of psychological political warfare, and in also like a warfare that includes like violence and very sort of physical ways of control, and you can work out how to do wealth distribution in a way and the creation of places to live and possessions if people want them and whatever, in a way that's a less of an us and them society. That's what I'd like to fix. I sort of pontificate about in 200, 300, 400 years what will the world look like. I think we have to look to longer futures. We're just at a little blip in the entire scheme of things when we look at the history of the world. I mean, the last 270 years, we've had the Industrial Revolution and everything that's bad and good that came from that. And we're at this point where we feel that, having these computers and smartphones, living in these little houses or towers in little boxes in the sky where we're isolated from other people is some kind of civilization, is kind of a little funky to me, right? So, if I look out through, I would love to see a world in 300 or 400 years when we're suddenly thinking, hey, I've got a purpose in life. Ikigai, I've got a purpose. I can go out and I can do the work that I need to do. I can raise my family in a way that's equitable. There's a way that I can be connected in society where I've got good education. My opinion is valued. It goes into the greater good for humanity. And, I don't have to worry about taxes. I don't have to worry about wealth. In fact, in 400 years, wealth and taxes could be an antiquated idea of things, right? And this new world beyond the Industrial Revolutions is something that I think we need to start to imagine. And the groundwork needs to start today, right? In 2020, because if suddenly, let's look to 2520, right? Kind of incredible science fiction. Nick, why are you doing this? Well, it makes you really suspend, the beliefs that you have in place today, and it dials up that idea of like, what if the world worked completely differently? What if we can grow all the food that we need and all the people can eat? What if we've got an education system that adapts, per child? What if we've got ways of working that actually has got to focus on making humanity better instead of selling, more widgets, right? So that's how I like to look at things when I look at the world, and I sort of wish for a better future. It's not a magic wand. It's basically decades and hundreds of years of really hard focused work. And, we have to get sort of the ego out the way and start really putting more women in charge, putting more diverse administrations in charge, so that we can get on with creating a world that's a little bit more just better in every way, shape or form, right?
Since magic wands don't exist, I'm going to take it back and I'm going to give you a time machine, because obviously that exists. Yeah. Get in the time machine. Where do you see cities in 2040? What will they look like? Will rapid urbanization continue? What are the new jobs? Will you be living on Mars by then?
Will we be living on Mars? I think it's a terrible decision to go and live on Mars anyway. Will there be a lunar base? Yes. interstellar travel, and the scientific exploration of that. The looking for minerals and other things that could be useful on Earth. Yes, that's good. Going to live on Mars is a terrible idea. It's not a very nice place to live. And sure, it's up there in the muskisms of the world, where we're desperately trying to create something that's like, ad astra, to the stars and beyond, right? So the next 20, 30 years, right? I live in Toronto, fastest growing city in North America. There's a lot of amazing benefits for living here. There's lots of different parts in Toronto, and people live in pockets, and pockets are typically, square miles or a number of streets that come together. And I live in an area where there's 2 or 3 streets, and the community is incredible, right? I think that we need to maintain that. I mean, we need to stoke that fire, right? We need to build out communities that can provide schooling, provide good places to live, with access to services. Very much like the mayor of Paris is thinking of Paris en Commune, like the 15-minute city. Where I live in Toronto, there's commissaries, there's museums, there's groceries, independent groceries on the stores. There's takeaway restaurants. Eventually, we'll be able to go and sit in restaurants again. There's libraries. It's cool. And this is something that we need to hold on to. Let's not get rid of that. Let's not digitize the whole world. Think virtually. I mean, again, if you go into the technocrats in Silicon Valley, they think, kids aren't going to write. Everyone's going to throw on virtual reality headsets, work from home forever, and we're all going to be happy, sort of living the lives that we live. I just think that when we come back to heart, human-centric design, entrepreneurial spirit, asset development that's for the greater good, renewable, replicable, repeatable, and those technology-enabled connections. That's sort of the groundwork. That's the principles for getting to 2040. And you know what? Like, I think we're going to experiment a lot along the way with new ways of living, new places to live. I look to cities like Barcelona. I look to cities like Tokyo, even, to show me what a big city could look like in the future. And it's a hugely interesting human experiment where so many people can live together and operate in a way where people can maintain their own lives. But one of the biggest challenges in the next 20, 30 years is maintaining our sense of humanity and connection and relationships and family and all these things. We have to remember are more important than any technologically enabled infrastructure of what people think a smart city is. Because a smart city is a human city. And really, you could build a city without technology or without modern technology, implement older technologies that, for water provision, for growing food and whatever. I mean, up there in Morocco, I mean, there's water irrigation systems that are 2,000 years old. I was reading an amazing book recently called Low Tech, which is like these systems are thousands of years old, for being able to crush grain and water irrigation and grow food and raise fish in aquaculture and whatever. It's so interesting. We forget that sometimes looking back can be an inspiration for the pathway forward. And I think that's what I'm trying to do in my life. So I sort of came up through the ranks of technology, and I've been plugged into the internet since the early 90s, and I've been looking at edge technologies. I'm excited about it all. Don't get me wrong. But the thing that I find the most surprising is when I sit down with executives, whether they're in engineering companies, whether they're in big tech companies or city administrations, they forget that love and equality and humanity are the most important things that they have to put on their office desks first thing in the morning, and that everything else is built from there. So that's been the most surprising thing that I've been doing over the last few years, is watching people as they're like, I hadn't quite looked at the world in that way. And it's like, well, we need to start remembering that, right? So that's my big sort of advice for the world, is like, put humanity first and put family first, put community first. You know, if there's someone having a tough time on the street, there's a reason, there's a story behind that. It's not that they're a bad person in society. It's just that society has been a bad system for them, right? So yeah, we have to have a little bit more compassion. Let's dial that up. You know, I think the future of smart cities is the compassionate city, and compassionate city that's sustainable.